The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse are some of the most striking figures in biblical prophecy, symbolizing the arrival of divine judgments on the earth. These riders, each with a unique mission, emerge as the Lamb of God opens the first four seals in the book of Revelation. They serve as harbingers of great tribulation and suffering that will mark the end times. Through their arrival, we are reminded of the intense trials that await humanity, urging believers to remain vigilant and steadfast in their faith. But what do these horsemen represent, and how do their prophecies resonate with the challenges of our world today? The white horse, conquest. The vision begins with the appearance of a white horse, whose rider holds a bow and wears a crown. Unlike the other riders, he does not wield a weapon for direct violence, but instead carries a bow without arrows, symbolizing a more subtle approach to conquest. Through influence, deception, and control rather than outright war, he rides out with a determined spirit, set on conquest. This imagery suggests a time when charismatic leaders or influential figures rise to power, spreading ideologies or agendas that reshape societies and dominate nations. The choice of a white horse could signify a facade of purity and righteousness, as white often symbolizes peace or victory. Yet, behind this appearance lies a hidden intent, as this rider's conquest is not about bringing genuine peace, but rather extending control over the minds and hearts of people. Some interpretations see this rider as representing the emergence of false leaders or deceptive messianic figures, those who gain the trust of the masses with promises of hope and unity, but ultimately lead their followers into turmoil. This idea is echoed in Revelation chapter 6, verse 2, where it says, "And I looked, and behold, a white horse. Its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer." The rider's crown is a symbol of authority granted, suggesting that his influence might be perceived as legitimate or even divinely endorsed at first. However, his ultimate goal is domination, subtly infiltrating governments, institutions, and even religious movements. This passage points to the dangerous allure of power, where those seeking dominion exploit fear, hope, and the desire for stability among nations. What begins as a promise of security can quickly shift into control and oppression, creating instability under the guise of authority. Throughout history, many have seen parallels between this rider and figures who have risen with grand visions, using charisma and influence to sway entire populations. These leaders, who often claim to be the answer to society's woes, can leave behind a legacy of broken promises and widespread disillusionment. As a harbinger of the end times, this horseman serves as a warning to believers to discern carefully and not be deceived by appearances. His coming marks the beginning of a series of events that will unsettle the world, setting the stage for the darker trials that follow. It's a reminder that not every voice promising peace and progress is genuine. Sometimes, they pave the way for greater turmoil. The red horse, war. As the second seal is opened, a fiery red horse emerges, its colors symbolizing bloodshed and turmoil. The rider of this horse is granted a terrifying power to strip peace from the earth, plunging humanity into a state of conflict and violence. Unlike the subtle influence of the first rider, this horseman brings overt chaos, where the harmony between people is shattered and communities turn against one another in violent strife. The scriptures in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4 paint a vivid picture of this chaos. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. The image of the large sword in the rider's hand signifies not just the capacity for physical warfare, but also the power to incite division, turning nations and families alike against each other. It is a symbol of the pervasive conflict that can spread through societies like wildfire, affecting not just the battlefield but the hearts and minds of people. The loss of peace that this rider brings is not limited to military confrontations. It represents a breakdown of social order at every level. It hints at civil unrest, revolutions, and the deep-rooted animosities that drive people to violence. The Red Horseman's arrival suggests a world where diplomatic resolutions fail, and where the drums of war grow louder, leading nations to clash over resources, ideologies, and ancient grievances. Under his influence, even those who once lived in harmony find themselves swept up in a tide of hostility. Throughout history, the shadow of the Red Horse has been seen in numerous wars and conflicts where nations have turned their weapons on each other, sometimes over long-standing tensions and sometimes ignited by a single spark. The prophetic imagery warns that such conflicts are not merely political, but are a deeper manifestation of the spiritual battles that rage within human hearts. It is the spirit of enmity and hatred that fuels these wars, where people are willing to destroy rather than seek understanding or reconciliation. The coming of the Red Horse is a reminder of how fragile peace can be, and how easily it can be disrupted when the desire for dominance and power takes precedence. The sword that this rider wields is not just a weapon but a symbol of division, turning brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. It speaks to the nature of humanity's darker impulses, where the craving for power and revenge can override the call for compassion and unity. In the context of the end times, this horseman serves as a stark reminder that human efforts to maintain peace are ultimately temporary. The world may experience periods of stability, but the seeds of conflict always remain, ready to be awakened. The Red Horse's presence warns believers to prepare for times when strife will seem inescapable, and to find strength in their faith when surrounded by a world falling into chaos. The Black Horse, famine. The third rider emerges from the shadows on a black horse, carrying a pair of scales in his hand, an ominous symbol of scarcity and economic hardship. The black color of the horse evokes darkness and despair, fitting for a time when hunger and deprivation sweep across the land. The scales represent the weighing of food, suggesting that resources will be rationed and every measure of grain will be counted carefully. It is a vision of a world where abundance is replaced by desperation, and the struggle for daily sustenance becomes the central concern for many. The prophecy in Revelation chapter 6, verses 5 and 6 describes this scene vividly. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." In this passage, the cost of basic food items like wheat and barley is described as incredibly high, equivalent to a full day's wage. It suggests that even the simplest of meals will be beyond reach for many, as families are forced to make difficult choices about what little they can afford. The scales in the rider's hand highlight the fragility of supply and demand, a time when the balance between resources and need is thrown off. This imagery points to an economic collapse where the price of essentials skyrockets while luxury items, symbolized by the oil and wine, remain relatively untouched. It is a stark reminder of the inequalities that often deepen during times of crisis, where the wealthy may still enjoy their comforts while the poor are left to scrape by with almost nothing. Historically, famine has often followed in the wake of war and conflict, as disruptions in trade and agriculture lead to shortages. The Black Horse's arrival serves as a continuation of the suffering brought by the previous riders, as the chaos of conquest and war gives way to hunger and deprivation. Fields that were once fertile become barren, and the crops that remain are fiercely fought over. It is a time when the basic act of putting food on the table becomes a daily struggle, and the safety nets of society unravel. This prophecy also speaks to the dire consequences of greed and exploitation. As resources grow scarce, those who control the means of production can manipulate prices, profiting from the desperation of others. The imbalance between the availability of food and its cost reflects a society where compassion has been overshadowed by self-interest. The command to not damage the oil and the wine may indicate that luxury goods are protected even as the majority suffer, revealing a world where economic disparity reaches its peak. The arrival of the Black Horse serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly prosperity can turn into scarcity, and how delicate the balance of human society truly is. In the context of the end times, this rider warns of a future where economic stability collapses, forcing people to confront the dependence on material wealth and the illusion of security it provides. It is a call to recognize the deeper values of faith and community, as believers are reminded that their hope must not rest in earthly abundance, but in the provision of God, even in times of trial. As the shadow of the black horse looms, it challenges us to reflect on how we use our resources and how we respond to the needs of those around us. It warns that times of scarcity will test not only our endurance, but also our compassion for others. For many, the presence of this horseman is a call to seek a higher source of sustenance, a faith that remains unshaken even when the world around them faces hunger and want. The pale horse, death. The fourth and final horseman emerges, riding a pale, ashen horse, a color that evokes the pallor of sickness and the stillness of the grave. His name is Death, and he is accompanied by Hades, the realm of the dead, trailing closely behind like a shadow that swallows the fallen. The arrival of this rider signifies the climax of the judgments brought by his predecessors, unleashing a wave of devastation that sweeps across the earth. This grim vision is vividly captured in Revelation chapter 6, verse 8. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. The presence of Death on the pale horse symbolizes the inevitable outcome of unchecked violence, scarcity, and disease, realities that the earlier horsemen set into motion. The sword represents continued bloodshed and conflict. Famine recalls the hunger and deprivation spread by the black horse, while plague points to the spread of deadly diseases that claim countless lives. Even the wild beasts of the earth become agents of death, suggesting a world where nature itself has turned hostile toward humanity. The power granted to this horseman and his companion, Hades, extends over a fourth of the earth, highlighting the vast scale of the suffering that is to come. This span of authority does not just reflect the physical death that claims the body, but also suggests a deeper, spiritual darkness, where many lose hope and succumb to despair. The combination of Death and Hades serves as a reminder that the physical end is not the final one. There is a spiritual dimension to the suffering, where souls are lost alongside lives. The devastation wrought by the pale horse echoes the fragility of human life and the unpredictability of existence. Throughout history, plagues and pandemics have decimated populations, leaving communities reeling in their wake. Famine and war, often intertwined, have torn through societies, breaking down the structures that once held them together. The imagery of the pale horse reminds us that in times of great suffering, even the mightiest civilizations can fall, and the comforts of life can disappear in an instant. Yet, the rider of the pale horse is more than just a harbinger of physical death. He symbolizes the finality of the judgments brought upon the world, a culmination of the consequences of human actions. Where the earlier horsemen revealed the seeds of corruption, violence, and greed, the pale horse comes to reap the harvest, underscoring the gravity of living in a world estranged from God's ways. It is a vivid portrayal of the reality that actions have consequences, and that the brokenness of the world cannot be ignored forever. In reflecting on the meaning of these prophecies, the four horsemen of the apocalypse serve as a powerful warning to all of humanity. They illustrate the dangers that arise when societies turn away from righteousness, embracing conflict, deception, and self-interest. The presence of the pale horse, in particular, reminds believers of the urgency of being spiritually prepared for trials and suffering, recognizing that life is fleeting and that hope must be anchored in something eternal. The words of Matthew chapter 24, verses 6 to 8 echo this warning, offering a perspective that transcends the immediate terror of these visions. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. This passage emphasizes that even as the world faces turmoil, God's plan remains in motion. The suffering brought by the four horsemen is not the final chapter, but rather a part of a larger story. one where justice and renewal ultimately prevail. For Christians, the presence of the pale horse is a call to perseverance, a reminder that even when faced with the shadow of death, there is a promise of life beyond this world. It challenges believers to find strength in their faith and to continue to trust in God's sovereignty, even when surrounded by uncertainty and fear. It urges them to look beyond the tribulation and hold fast to the hope of a future where He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Revelation chapter 21, verse 4. The four horsemen of the apocalypse and their prophecies paint a vivid picture of a world facing immense trials. Yet, these trials are not without purpose, serving as a reminder of the need for repentance and faith. For those who place their trust in Jesus Christ, the tribulation of the horsemen is a prelude to a greater promise, a new heaven and a new earth where peace and righteousness prevail. As Revelation chapter 21, verse 4 promises, He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.